I am Sunny Harper, 28 years old, 7 months pregnant, standing in the middle of a brand new apartment in Seattle, a place I poured my heart into, shaping it into a home. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, a warm housewarming filled with laughter echoing off the walls, fairy lights twinkling on the balcony, friends and family gathered around me with joy. But the atmosphere cracked in an instant. My sister, Vivian, 31, sharp, polished, the kind of lawyer who never falters in a courtroom, snatched the microphone from the karaoke host. Her voice cut through the room, cold and merciless. "I've already spoken with an attorney. From this moment on, I am the rightful owner of this apartment." Crowd froze. My breath caught. Vivian's eyes, hard and piercing like blades, locked onto me as if I were an intruder in my own home. "Sunny doesn't belong here," she declared, pointing straight at me. "She needs to leave." The music died, the lights suddenly felt harsh, and every pair of eyes turned toward me, my joy collapsing into disbelief and dread. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. My heart seemed to stop. My husband, Ethan, 30 years old, a software engineer, just stood there sipping his drink, his eyes fixed on the floor, saying nothing. The silence in the room was unbearable, heavy enough to crush me. Every gaze was pinned on me, expectant, almost hungry, as if waiting for me to crumble under the weight of humiliation. But I refused to break. Slowly, I reached into my handbag and pulled out something no one could have predicted, a small USB drive. Inside it lay the evidence I had been quietly gathering, piece by piece, while everyone thought I was naive. That single flash of metal in my hand marked the beginning of my fight, my stand against betrayal and deceit. 6 months earlier, everything had seemed perfect. Ethan and I had just signed the contract for a 2-bedroom apartment, sunlight spilling generously through the wide glass windows. For me, it was nothing short of a dream come true. Our first real home, just as I was preparing to welcome our first child into the world. I could already see the nursery in my mind. Pastel blue walls, a small wooden crib set by the window, curtains swaying gently in the summer air. It was the image of safety, of family, of the future I thought we were building together. But somewhere along the way, Ethan began to change. He stayed out later and later. His phone buzzed endlessly, and when it did, his eyes would dart down at the glowing screen as though it held more gravity than I ever could. When I asked him about it, he brushed me off with a muttered, "Just work, Sunny." I wanted so desperately to believe him, to let his words be enough. But deep down, something tugged at me, an instinct whispering that all was not as it seemed. It wasn't just Ethan who unsettled me. Vivian began to intrude in ways I hadn't expected. First, it was messages, sharp, probing questions disguised as concern. "Did you pay the mortgage yet? That apartment is expensive. Are you sure you can handle it?" Her tone always carried an edge, reminding me she was 3 years older, a lawyer, successful and self-assured, while I was the younger sister she seemed to look down on. Then came the day that shattered any illusion of boundaries. I returned from work to find her standing in my living room, a tape measure stretched across the curtains. She didn't even glance at me when she said, almost dismissively, "These drapes are tacky, Sunny. This place needs something more refined, more fitting." I froze, stunned. "How did you get in here?" Vivian gave a casual shrug, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Ethan gave me a key. He said you wouldn't mind." But I did mind. I minded more than I could put into words. That was my home, my sanctuary, and she had crossed into it without a second thought. When I confronted Ethan later, hurt spilling from every word, he refused to meet my eyes. He waved it off, telling me I was overreacting, too sensitive. His voice was flat, detached, as though my feelings were nothing more than an inconvenience to him. In that moment, unease began to coil inside me, tightening with every passing day. Grew like a storm cloud gathering at the horizon, silent, dark, inevitable. Something was coming. I didn't know what, but my bones told me it would change everything. Truth began to unravel, piece by piece, until it was impossible to ignore. My closest friend Lena, 29, a photographer with a sharp eye for detail, was the first to sense the tension I carried like a shadow. Over steaming cups of coffee one rainy afternoon, I let it spill out. Ethan's distance, Vivian's intrusions, the strange feeling that I was being slowly pushed out of the life I thought was mine. Lena's brow furrowed, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "Sunny, she's acting like that apartment belongs to her. You need to be careful." Her warning clung to me. From then on, I started noticing more. The signs had been there all along, but Lena's words sharpened my vision. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find Vivian rifling through the stack of papers I'd left on the counter. Our mortgage contract, utility bills, documents I had neatly organized. She looked up, smiling with a feigned innocence. "Just browsing," she said lightly, but her eyes were cold, calculating. That was the moment I decided to start documenting everything. I saved screenshots of her intrusive messages, cataloged her sudden appearances at the apartment. There was the afternoon she barged in with a folder of paint swatches, flipping through them as if she were the decorator in charge. "This place will look much better once it's mine," she murmured with quiet certainty, leaving me rattled. But the most devastating discovery came one morning when Ethan was in the shower. The sound of running water filled the silence as I sat at his desk, staring at his laptop. My hands trembled as I opened his email, driven by an intuition I could no longer suppress. And there it was. A thread between Ethan and Vivian, the subject line blunt and undeniable. Apartment plan. Clicked, my chest tightening. Ethan had forwarded her our mortgage contract, my mortgage contract. The one I had signed alone because his credit was too damaged, his financial history too unstable. My name was the one legally binding that apartment, my responsibility, my home. And yet, in the thread, Vivian's words cut like ice. "Sunny doesn't need to know. We'll take care of this." I stared at the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears. My fingers shook so badly it was hard to control the keyboard, but I forced myself to take a screenshot, capturing every line, every betrayal. It was no longer just her arrogance or his silence. This was no misunderstanding, no case of overreaction on my part. It was a conspiracy, carefully woven between my husband and my sister behind closed doors, under the guise of what's best. As I sat there, my reflection faint in the laptop screen, my stomach knotted around the life growing inside me. The woman who had once been my protector, and the man who had once vowed to love me, had joined hands in secrecy against me. For the first time, I understood. This wasn't only about the apartment. It was about power, about erasing me from the very foundation of the life I had built. And I knew then I could no longer afford to ignore the storm that had been gathering. I had the first piece of undeniable proof in my hands, and it terrified me as much as it steeled me. This was the beginning of a battle I hadn't chosen, but one I had no choice but to fight. Tension had been simmering for weeks, but it reached a boiling point just 7 days before the housewarming party. I came home late from work, hoping for a quiet evening, and instead found Vivian standing in the center of my living room, a glass of red wine in her hand as though she already owned the space. She swirled the liquid slowly, her eyes sweeping over the furniture, the walls, the curtains I had chosen. Then she looked at me with a smirk and declared, "This place needs my touch, Sunny. You're not sophisticated enough." Her words ignited fire in my chest, but I forced my voice to remain steady. "And what exactly do you mean when you keep saying you helped with the down payment? I paid for every cent out of my own savings." Vivian's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Oh, Sunny, don't be naive. I've always supported you and Ethan. That's what sisters do." It was a blatant lie. She had never contributed a single dollar to this apartment. Every piece of it, every nail, every brick, every installment was mine. Her false claim was more than arrogance. It was an attempt to rewrite the truth, to twist perception until others began to doubt me. By the time the night of the housewarming arrived, the air itself seemed charged, heavy, as if it carried the weight of secrets and unspoken wars. Guests filled the apartment, friends from work, neighbors, a few of Ethan's colleagues. Laughter and chatter mingled with the music, but beneath it all, I felt the unease pressing down on me. Lena moved through the room with quiet grace, helping me arrange drinks and set out glasses. She caught my eye, her expression tight with concern. Her gaze said what she didn't voice aloud. "Be ready. Something isn't right." Ethan, meanwhile, was a ghost in his own home. He avoided conversation, avoided me, even avoided looking at Vivian, though I noticed how often his phone lit up in his hand. He clung to it like a lifeline, eyes flicking downward with every vibration. He seemed determined to detach himself from the night, from me, from all of it. Vivian, of course, made her entrance fashionably late. The door swung open and in she walked, draped in confidence, every step calculated. She carried herself like a queen arriving at her coronation, her smile a mask of superiority that didn't bother hiding the disdain beneath. Conversations faltered as she crossed the room, people instinctively giving her attention as if she had demanded it. And then it happened. Without hesitation, she seized the microphone from the karaoke host, silencing the music mid-note. The laughter stopped, the chatter dissolved, and the only sound was her voice, crisp and merciless as it sliced through the air. "I've already spoken with a lawyer," she announced, her eyes sweeping over the crowd before landing squarely on me. "From now on, I am the rightful owner of this apartment." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The words felt unreal, impossible. My knees weakened, and for a terrifying second, I thought I might collapse. Polished floor beneath me felt as though it had cracked open, threatening to swallow me whole. Lena's hand found mine, her grip firm, grounding. She leaned close, whispering urgently, "Stay calm, Sunny. Don't let her see you break." But how could I stay calm when the walls of my life were closing in on me? Vivian stood there, unwavering, her chin raised with the certainty of victory. She looked at me not as a sister, not as family, but as an obstacle she had already conquered. Around us, the silence was suffocating. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, all of them stared, their faces painted with shock, confusion, curiosity. They weren't just witnesses, they were jurors, silently measuring me, waiting for my response. And then there was Ethan, my husband, my supposed partner in all of this. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even lift his eyes from the drink in his hand. His silence cut sharper than Vivian's words ever could. It wasn't neutrality, it was betrayal disguised as passivity. Every second stretched unbearably long, every gaze pressing harder against my skin. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the way their eyes flicked between Vivian and me, as though trying to decide who truly belonged here. Vivian basked in the silence, in the theater of it all. She thrived in moments like this, when she could control the narrative, standing tall as though she had already claimed victory. Her posture was triumphant, her smile deliberate. To everyone watching, she seemed unshakable, untouchable. And me? I stood there, my chest heaving, my heart pounding so loudly I feared the room could hear it. But beneath the panic, beneath the humiliation, something else stirred. A spark. Anger. Resolve. She wanted me to crumble. Thin silence begged me to surrender. The room seemed to anticipate my downfall. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Even as the ground threatened to disappear beneath me, I straightened my spine, tightened my grip on Lena's hand, and met Vivian's gaze head-on. Because this wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of the fight I never asked for, but one I was ready to wage. The war had begun. After the housewarming, the shards of my life kept cutting deeper. I thought Vivian's public claim had been the worst, an assault in broad daylight, but what followed felt like a slow, deliberate unmasking. A day after the party, my colleague Tara, 27, a bright PR specialist with a stubborn sense of right and wrong, slipped me a message and asked me to come into the office. When I opened what she'd sent, my knees threatened to give out. A photo of Vivian and Ethan sitting close at a cafe, the afternoon light soft around them, Vivian's hand resting on his in a way that was neither casual nor accidental. The image looked like a betrayal pasted into color. Tara didn't stop there. She showed me something she'd captured from Ethan's unlocked phone, an exchange of texts she'd managed to screenshot without meaning to. One of them read in blunt, ugly words, "Sunny doesn't know. When we push her out, the apartment will be ours." There was no euphemism, no plausible deniability. It was a plan, typed plainly, with a confidence that made my stomach drop into an icy pit. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. For a second, I wanted to smash the phone, to tear the evidence from the world and make the pain stop. Instead, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This was no accident. This was conspiracy. I started moving like someone who is only partly awake, my actions threaded with fear and an odd, mechanical purpose. I photographed the screenshots, backed them up, saved copies. I printed the cafe image and slid it into a folder with trembling hands. But evidence alone, I knew, would not be enough. They were careful, practiced. Vivian was a lawyer, and sales of fraud had a way of hiding in small, plausible lies. I needed something that carried a voice, something Vivian couldn't pretend she hadn't said. So I baited a conversation and recorded it. I know it sounds small, petty even, but the moment was enormous in the way it landed in my chest. I called her under the guise of wanting to talk things through, of trying to be reasonable. In truth, I was a woman who had been stripped of reason and needed the truth to be spoken aloud. When Vivian answered, her tone was annoyingly bright, as though nothing were at stake. I kept my voice steady, the way Lena had taught me in rehearsed breathing exercises, low, even, unafraid. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. There was a thin, almost amused pause, and then she laughed, a cold sound that made something in me harden. "Sunny," she said almost tenderly, "you can't keep that apartment. You don't have the capacity. Ethan and I will manage it better. It's for the best." She said it plainly. No careful framing, no attempt to dress it up. The words landed like an admission. I pressed record the whole time. Later, when I listened in the quiet of Lena's living room, those few sentences echoed like a verdict. I let the recording play over and over to convince my own ears that I hadn't imagined it. There were more fragments to collect. Tara dug up another piece, an email Vivian had sent to the real estate company, not to inquire but to assert. In the header, the sender name looked too neat, the language practiced. In the body, Vivian declared changes of contact details, proposed renovations, requested meetings to discuss ownership transitions. My blood ran cold when Tara showed me the attachment, a scanned document apparently bearing my signature. My signature. I compared curves and loops, the little tilt I'd been taught to adjust by a bank clerk years ago. It wasn't my hand on the line. It was a forgery, sleek, deliberate, trained to look right. I printed that email too and added it to the folder. Each new page felt like a small nail hammered into the coffin of the life I thought I had. The pattern was ugly and methodical. Photos, texts, a forged email with my signature pasted onto it, and then, most damning of all, the voice of my sister admitting she intended to remove me from the home I had paid for with my own money. I left that night with the folder clutched to my chest and the baby's movement under my ribs like a quiet accusation. I moved into Lena's spare room, temporary, practical, safe. Lena helped me sort through every file, every screenshot, every recording. She labeled folders, made digital backups, sent copies to a secure cloud account. Her hands were steady when mine shook. When I told her every humiliating detail, she didn't gasp or soften. She became the exact opposite, resolute. "Sunny," she said, voice low and fierce. "You have enough to take them down. Don't let them win." Her certainty steadied me in a way that surprise and anger could not. Lena and I mapped out the small steps, what evidence to preserve, who to show first, how to protect the originals. We talked about calling a lawyer, about contacting a forensic document examiner for the forged signature, about whether the recording would hold up if Vivian contested it. We talked in painstaking practical terms: depositions, chain of custody, timestamps. Speaking in facts and plans helped turn my panic into purpose. But the weight of betrayal was not simply legal. It was existential. My sister and my husband, the people who should have been my shelter, had conspired to erase me. They had recalibrated my future without asking me. The apartment, once a map of my hopes, became a symbol of everything they thought they could take from me without consequence. And yet, every time I reached for the dark, an ember inside me flared. I thought of the months I had spent saving, of the nursery curtains I'd chosen, of the ways I had imagined my child's small hands exploring that sunlight. That life would not be stolen with a few forged documents and a cold smile. If they believed they could push me out with whispers and clever emails, they had misjudged the magnitude of what they had provoked. So we organized. We documented. We breathed and plotted in the thin, bright hours before dawn. Lena guarded me on the outside while I prepared on the inside. We were no longer just collecting proof, we were building a case and, more importantly, a resolve. This was no longer a private heartbreak. It was a battle for everything that anchored me: my home, my name, my unborn child's future. And I would fight it, one collected piece of truth at a time. Showdown in court. I hired Hannah Brooks, a sharp and fearless attorney from Seattle who had a reputation for cutting through lies like a scalpel. Her office was modest, bare wooden shelves stacked with case files, the faint hum of traffic outside, but she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who knew how to win battles. I laid everything on her desk: the damning emails between Ethan and Vivian, the secret audio recording, screenshots of their late-night conversations, and the forged documents they had tried to use against me. Hannah studied them carefully, her eyes narrowing. "We'll go after Vivian for fraud," she said firmly, "and Ethan for violating your privacy. They wanted to play dirty, now they'll face consequences." 1 week later, the fight escalated beyond the courtroom. Vivian unleashed a carefully crafted post on social media, dripping with venom. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I had abandoned Ethan during his darkest times, that I didn't deserve the apartment because I was cold and selfish. Strangers, people who knew nothing of me, swarmed the comments with judgment. Some called me heartless. Others told me to give the man a break. It stung. Words from people I would never meet cut deeper than I expected. One evening, scrolling through the flood of cruelty, I felt the familiar weight of anger pressing against my chest. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, ready to fire back. But Lena, who had been watching me quietly, put her hand on mine. "Don't let them drag you into their game," she whispered. "Silence is stronger. The truth will speak for itself." Her calmness anchored me. I closed the laptop and exhaled. She was right. This wasn't a battle to fight online, it was one for the courtroom. The day of the trial arrived, the air in the courthouse heavy with tension. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Hannah, who radiated confidence in her dark suit. Across the aisle, Vivian wore a carefully chosen outfit, her version of innocence. Ethan avoided my gaze, staring at the polished wooden floor as though it might swallow him. When Hannah rose to present our case, she didn't just display evidence, she told a story. Piece by piece, she connected the dots, building a narrative so clear it left no room for denial. She played the audio recording where Vivian admitted to orchestrating the scheme. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Then came the forged emails, with signatures that even a casual observer could see were clumsy imitations of mine. The judge's expression hardened. His brows knitted together as he flipped through the exhibits, his lips pressed in a thin line. Vivian's face paled, her bravado cracking. She stammered when questioned, her words collapsing into incoherence. Ethan, sitting beside her, didn't utter a word. His head bowed, shame written all over him. Finally, after hours that felt like years, the judge delivered his verdict. "The apartment," he declared, voice steady and uncompromising, "belongs entirely to the plaintiff." He turned to Vivian. "You will face further investigation for fraud." And then to Ethan. "You are ordered to pay damages for violation of privacy." The gavel struck the wood with a sharp finality that echoed through the chamber. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Relief washed over me like a tide. From the gallery, I caught Lena's eyes. She was smiling, proud and steady, her presence reminding me that I hadn't fought this battle alone. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lifting. Justice had spoken. A new beginning. The divorce papers were signed only a week after the trial. I didn't linger, didn't hesitate, didn't give Ethan another chance to pull me back into his web. With a steady hand, I cut every tie. It was strangely liberating, like unclipping a lock that had weighed on my chest for years. For the first time, I felt like the story was finally mine to write. 3 months later, on a brilliant summer afternoon, I brought Lily into the world. The room smelled of disinfectant and hope, the walls echoing with my breathless cries. And when the nurse finally placed my daughter on my chest, the world shifted. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, fragile yet strong, and in that moment I understood a new kind of love, one that asked for nothing but gave everything. Lena was there too, holding my hand through the storm, her eyes wet with tears as she whispered, "You did it! She's perfect." We moved soon after. Not into the apartment I fought so hard for, but into a smaller place in Seattle that felt warmer, brighter, freer. The wide windows welcomed the morning sun, and the balcony overflowed with flowers Lena and I planted together, petunias, daisies, and lavender that danced in the breeze. Every petal felt like a promise that the past had ended and something new was taking root. Ethan and Vivian faded like ghosts. No apologies, no closure, no explanations. But I realized I didn't need them. Their silence was its own confession. They had tried to break me, and yet here I was, stronger, calmer, and standing taller than ever. Holding Lily in my arms with Lena beside me, I understood the truth. Victory wasn't about property or verdicts. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about rising from the ashes of betrayal and choosing life, peace, and love. From this journey, I've carried 5 lessons that I want to share with you, lessons that shaped not just my survival but my transformation. When silence can be louder than defense. When Vivian smeared me online, I wanted to scream back. But Lena reminded me, not every battle deserves your voice. Sometimes the strongest response is none at all. Truth doesn't need shouting, it simply needs time to shine. Evidence speaks louder than emotions. In court, I learned the power of patience and preparation. Pain, anger, even heartbreak, they won't sway a judge. Facts will. Build your case with truth, and it will protect you even when your heart is trembling. 3. Not all endings are losses. Divorce felt like failure for a fleeting second. But as the papers dried, I realized it was freedom. Walking away isn't weakness, it's often the bravest thing you can do. For family is chosen as much as given. I thought I was losing everything, my marriage, my reputation, my stability. But then Lena was there, unwavering, proof that true family is the one that stands beside you, not the one that shares your last name. 5. Love after betrayal is possible. Not romantic love, not yet. But a deeper love, a mother's love for her child and self-love reclaimed after years of doubt. Betrayal doesn't end you, it reshapes you into someone who can love more wisely, more fiercely. Now, every morning when I open the balcony door and watch Lily stretch her arms toward the sun, I feel it in my bones. I won. Not because Vivian and Ethan vanished, not because I proved them wrong, but because I refused to let their lies define me. My happiness no longer depends on them. It never did. This is my story, but maybe it's also yours in some way. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or underestimated, remember this. You are stronger than they think, and your new beginning is waiting. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. So together we can keep reminding each other that no betrayal is the end, only the start of something new.